And for more on this disturbing turn of events in some African countries, let's speak with an international affairs analyst, Dr. Jide, who joins us live via Zoom from Abuja. Good to have you join us.
It's my pleasure. Good evening, Nigerians.
So should we see this particular coup in the context of other military interventions in Francophone countries, or does this stand alone when you look at developments in Gabon recently?
Well, I think we need to situate this more in the anti-democratic manifestation and democratic reversal sweeping across Africa. Yes, for majority of them, they are Francophone countries from Chad to Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Gabon. But Guinea was colonized by Britain, and Sudan did not have any pact with France. And all of these countries across Africa have been plagued with insurrection. Right now, in fact, Sudan is in full-blown war. And you recall that very recently, the federal government of Nigeria to evacuate its citizens, largely made up of students that are studying in that country. So it's just a manifestation of the democratic fatigue, given the fact that democracy has not been able to produce the kind of dividends that are promised during campaigns. 52nd governor of New York, Matthew Cuomo, said politicians campaign in poetry and deliver in prose. We have seen a lot of campaign promises that are never fulfilled. Many African countries are still grappling with poverty, high rate of unemployment, misgovernance, maladministration, corruption, and all the things that were promised during the decolonization period of the 60s are still a mirage. Look at the situation of Nigeria. We have had 29 years of military interregnum, and we are just lucky to have an uninterrupted 24 years of civil rule for the very first time since independence. But you ask yourself, what has democracy delivered to Nigeria and to many African countries? High cost of living, high level of corruption, high level of unemployment, high level of poverty, high level of sicknesses and diseases, famine. So these are the disillusionment that has made military coup to be a welcome idea. Just July 26, we have the junta in Niger Republic striking and putting Mohamed Bazoum under house arrest. Now, another has happened in Gabon. And if we are not very careful...
So, Dr. Joe, if I may just come in light of what you have said, the spokesperson for the president earlier on, while speaking on behalf of the president, he was briefing the press, and he said that the president is committed to working with other heads of states to defend democracy on the continent. In the light of what you just said, where should African Union begin, and what would that process take?
Well, African Union needs to begin by ensuring that we have credible elections. Because, look, elections is about leadership recruitment. Situations where people rig themselves into office and use the instrumentality of judiciary to perpetuate themselves in office, or situations where, leaders fraudulently alter their constitution to allow them third term or even to remove term limits. We continue to whet people's appetites to ask for military takeover. Look at what happened in Gabon. The man there had been in power after his father for 14 years, and yet he was not satisfied. He altered the constitution of Gabon to allow him for a third term, and a charade of an election was held last Saturday, 26th of August. Of course, you cannot continue to have disputed elections. You cannot continue to have, violent elections, and then you force yourself on the people. You feel that the votes of the people does not count. you muzzle the civil society, you gag the media, and you don't allow democratic ethos to flourish. And then you think people will
Dr.
not
Jide
find sympathy in military
just a
coup.
moment. Some people will say, look, there is no excuse for a military intervention. That a military intervention is bad in no matter what angle you look at it from. It's not as though the military leaders has done better, in most of these cases. Does this give credence to the call made by ECOWAS that perhaps use of force would work in ending this wave of coups in Africa?
Well, use of force may be counterproductive, but I do agree that quite unfortunately we are faced with a catch-22 situation. On one hand, the military pretends to be a messianic group. They shoot themselves into power, but we have not seen significant dividends of democracy under military rule. Today, we have over $5 billion of Abacha loot being repatriated back to Nigeria over 20 years after the man died. And that's just one individual. So where is the fight against corruption? And don't forget, when the military strikes, they suspend the constitution and remove or destroy all democratic institutions. There is a high level of repression of the media and civil society. The parliament or the legislative assembly is dissolved, and then you leave only judiciary and you count the judiciary. So in summary, the military has not been a better option. But what we are saying is that, and the answer to your question about, forceful eviction of pushists or coupists, it's not that easy. Because look at what has happened with the removal of Omar al-Bashir in Sudan. After his removal, the military could not agree among themselves about transition program. And what we now have is a full-blown war. And that's what we don't want in any African country. So,
well, I think that's also a fine example. What's happening in Sudan is also a fine example that, look, the military doesn't offer anything better, than what it takes over from.
Exactly.
I wish we could continue the conversation, Dr. Jide Ojo, but I'm afraid we do have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your analysis and your time. African International Affairs Analyst, Dr. Jide Ojo.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Good evening.